Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. And hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 7, the elevations from verses 58 to 67. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge to God from the cursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. والبلد الطيب يخرج نباته بإذن ربه والذي خبث لا يخرج إلا نكدا كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون. As for the good land, it yields its produce by the leave of its Lord. But as for the bad, it produces nothing but hardship and misery. Thus we explain the revelations in various ways for people who are thankful. لقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فقال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم. We sent Noah to his people. He said, O my people, worship God. You have no deity other than him. I fear for you the punishment of a tremendous day. قال الملأ من قومه إن لنراك في ضلال مبين. The dignitaries among his people said, We see that you are in obvious error. قال يا قوم ليس بي ضلالة ولكني رسول من رب العالمين. He said, O my people, I am not in error, but I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. أبلغكم رسالات ربي وأنصح لكم وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. I deliver to you the messages of my Lord, and I advise you, and I know from God what you do not know. أو عجبتم أن جاءكم ذكر من ربكم على رجل منكم لينذركم ولتتقوا ولعلكم ترحمون. Do you wonder that a reminder has come to you from your Lord through a man from among you to warn you and to lead you to righteousness, and so that you may attain mercy? فكذبوه فأنجيناه والذين معه في الفلك وأغرقنا الذين كذبوا بآياتنا إنهم كانوا قوما عامين. But they called him a liar. So we saved him and those with him in the ark, and we drowned those who rejected our revelations. They were blind people. وإلى عاد أخاهم هودا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره أفلا تتقون. And to Ad, their brother Hud, he said, O my people, worship God. You have no deity other than him. Will you not take heed? قال الملأ الذين كفروا من قومه إن لنراك في سفاهة وإن لنظنك من الكاذبين. The elite of his people who disbelieved said, We see foolishness in you, and we think you are a liar. قال يا قوم ليس بي سفاهة ولكني رسول من رب العالمين. He said, O my people, there is no foolishness in me, but I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. صدق الله العظيم. God the Great said the truth. The verses here, it starts with something that is amazing to understand. God is telling us about how the land where the people are good and the people are good and the land itself is good, it produces its leaves by the permission of God. It produces its good by the permission of God. While the bad land, it produces very little except hardship and misery. The land here can be understood in many ways. One is that you are that land. If you're a good land, you're going to be measured by the fruits that you produce, and people are going to enjoy your presence because you bring all these blessings and fruits that God has allowed for you to produce. While the land that is bad, it just brings hardship and misery. Now, there is a different way for us to also appreciate what God is telling us here, that the decisions that you make truly affect what the outcome is going to be. People assume that religion is going to only be applied on the day of judgment, and you have your life here to live based on your circumstances. But the more religious you are and the more you are closer to God's message, the better results you're going to find in this world. You're going to be that land that is producing these good products, these good produce that God has bestowed upon everyone around you, and you included. But the thing that people do not recognize is that they think that these actions do not have consequences for them in this worldly life. Us as human beings, we can start to get accustomed to some of the pain and some of the issues that we're enduring, thinking that this has become the norm. There are people that suffer from chronic back back pain. And as soon as that back pain is lifted from them, or they solve it, they go, well, I didn't know how I was capable of surviving so long under that discomfort, because they've simply become numb to the discomfort, to the pain that they have been enduring. And it's the same thing with these individuals that believe that they can keep carrying on despite their psychological issues because they have disbelieved in God. They think that they could endure it, but it's slowly withering them away until to a point where they're completely run out, fatigued in whatever they've been doing. It's not producing results. So if you're not seeing the fruits of your labor right now in the world after you have been practicing your religion for quite some time, or that if you have been born in a religion that is not producing the results that you're looking for, not the results of a wealthy life, a life full of affluence in this world and what you assume is a success if you're a person who's bought into this world, but rather the success of you being a positive member in your society, in your community, inviting towards God, being a good submitter and doing the actions that God has needed, and God supporting you with those actions and giving you the resources and blessings for you to accomplish that. This is how you could truly see if you're on the right path or not. But there's another way of us seeing this verse, that the people themselves are also affecting the land that they're on. If someone is doing a very good job as a community, if a bunch of people are coming together and they're upholding the religion of God, God tells us that he opens to them the doors of many things and that he would increase them in his blessings. And in fact, in this few verses, we've also have been introduced to the story of Noah. If this is the first time in the Quran, if we're reading it in the order that we're reading it, where Noah and his story has been mentioned. Yes, the name Noah was mentioned in chapter 2, but this is the first time we're getting somewhat of a detailed report of what he endured. And we are now getting examples of what is called the tradition of God, or the way of God, where he orders people who are disbelievers, who have become numb to the pain, to their disbelief, and when they are told what the truth is, they ridicule the elites of them, want to shut the messenger up, they make fun of the messenger, and then God enacts his judgment on them, and he removes them, and he allows other people to inherit the land instead of them. But to get to the point, now, if a nation is really being a good nation and they are righteous, and God is increasing them, as Noah says in a different chapter, that God will send to you the skies in many portions, and so that the land will produce even more fruits, then we could clearly see that the people who are good, their land is full of produce and it's being blessed by God however God wants to bless them. While the land that has many concepts of polytheism, they are also suffering from how the land is producing its good. There is a very real life example that we could see in this day and age, which is in the Dominican Republic and their neighbors, Haiti. So both lands, despite being on the exact same island, under the exact same environments, the Dominican Republic is full of fruits and vegetations and different types of produce. While in Haiti, it is very difficult for them to produce the same fruits, yet alone whatever they're being given, it's not the same, nearly as the same level as what is being presented in the Dominican Republic. Now, the thing about Haiti is that it's also known for its voodoo and its reliance on jinn and things of that nature. They have a lot of concepts that is akin to polytheism and attaching themselves to things that are not righteous. Of course, I'm not saying that every Haitian does this, but there is this common practice that is practiced within the nation that is producing this type of evil polytheism and idolatry, which is not present in the Dominican Republic. And the only difference is just the society, but the land itself is also responding because of what God has ordered it to respond to certain things, where one side is producing a lot more than the other side. So we could see this is being enacted in front of us, so that on the day of judgment, for whoever's reflecting on the verses of God can see it being given to them in real life examples. And then, of course, we are presented with now the story of Noah. In a very quick way, Noah is telling his people to serve God because he is fearing, since they are taking other deities, that there's going to be a tremendous punishment. The people who are dignitaries, the elites among them, are saying, no, you're wrong. We think you're crazy. You're possessed. And he is solidifying his position. He is defending himself, and he's saying, I believe that God is the one who's guiding me, and you need to listen to me because you're about to face a very terrible punishment. And he's delivering to you, I'm delivering to you, is what Noah said, that the messages of God, because God has picked him, and he knows from God what they do not know, and he's advising them. But people like that who are sealed, God knows very well it's not for them to turn around and be righteous people, because they've already been given many signs before a messenger coming where they've ignored those signs. And this is now a very easy, spoon-fed way of telling them that the punishment is very close and this is their last chance for turning back. But these people do not want the mercy of God. They do not understand God the way that he's supposed to be understood as a human being, and they want to persist in their falsehood and their oppression. They're calling a messenger of God a liar, and God thus saved him and the people around him in an ark. It was a very spectacular way of him being saved, because he was building an ark and people were making fun of him. These parts of the details of the stories we get later, where they had ample opportunity now to believe and to turn, but God has sealed their hearts because of how unrighteous and how deluded they were and how much they wanted to persist in their lies. And then the story is being given to us again in the concept of Hud, another superpower which is known as Ad. They were given another messenger called Hud, who went through the same process. He's telling their people, and the people over there, especially the elites who are the ones commanding the society on how to live and what to do and who to attack and who not to attack and who's an ally, the ones who are making the core decisions and leading the rest of the pack, they also said that he was a fool and a liar. And the same argument was given by Hud, which is the same argument that Noah gave, that he is just advising them and that he's giving them the messages that God has bestowed upon his people. But these individuals just simply do not want to accept that God has sent a messenger among them. In fact, they're so arrogant that they believe that they should have been picked for God to communicate with them. And since they were not the ones who got picked, then the man in front of them has to be a liar, because they've always found themselves more important than everyone else. And the only people that would give they would give some sort of values are the other elites among them. It's not the value of love and a proper relationship. It's just a recognizing another wolf, which is what they are. These people are liars. These people are oppressors. They have driven their communities and societies to be very blind and very dumb. And this is what God is telling us about Ad specifically, that they were a blind people. And so was Noah. Noah's people were also very blind in what was being presented to them. They have numbed themselves to the pain that they were enduring for many years because of their decisions. We can actively see this in the world today when we look at the superpower known as the United States. The Americans right now are suffering from a lot of pain, that they have numbed themselves to it, and they have numbed themselves from the embarrassment of what the rest of the world is watching and what is happening within the American politics and the American societies. They call it a developed nations, but it has some conditions that make you wonder on how developed nations can get to this point where justice is no longer something that is valued, where the freedom of speech they once promised each other is no longer active. And finally, in the more worse issue is that they are now engaging in wars and ways to oppress other nations, whether through economic pressures or through military pressure. And they're failing and falling on their faces because they're cutting all the relationships and the ties that they have once built in this world. It's a nation that is falling, and any messenger that is repeating to them the messages of God, they quickly turn on him and they call him a crazy man, and they put him down, and they destroy his legacy and they destroy his character by just smearing him and slandering him. It's very similar to what Noah and Hud has went through. Of course, these people do not mean, those people who are repeating the messages of God to the elites over there, they're not messengers of God themselves, but rather they're disciples who are saying the same things that the messengers would have said. They're reminding about God. They're telling people in regards to having fear, because they cannot stay as a superpower forever, and that time can change, and that if they do not correct themselves, whatever blessings that they have is going to be taken away from them, especially when they're putting their trust in these elites, these darker people, the deeper state and the darker side of the government, and they allow those people to make the decisions for them. This is when that nation, which we once knew as a superpower, is being driven to the floor. And if God does send a messenger to them, and this is now somebody who has been inspired by God to speak to the elites, they will ridicule him, call him a liar, say, why wasn't God choosing? Why did God not choose them? Until the words get completely fulfilled on those elites and those people that are in power, and then they get removed. So as we see, the Quran is truly giving us an example to what we witness from our day to day. There's many things in these pages that we have just read, this page, these verses that we have just indulged in and pondered about, that can be reflected in the world in front of us. Because the reality is God's system is actually simple for someone to perceive it. And it's very deep when somebody wants to ponder about it. And it truly has an answer to all your situations, especially in the way that God has presented this book to us. And now when we're reading these books and we reflect upon them and we are applying them to the world that we see in front of us, we can clearly see that the end, the destination of said nation, the one that we just spoke about, the United States of America, is going to suffer from the same destination that all these other nations suffered. Because if those other superpowers were capable of believing and changing and they chose not to, we're going to be expecting the same from this superpower. So it is very good for us to have our hope in God and for some people to be saved. But do not try to go against the current, thinking that God is going to change this whole nation, especially after all the oppression that they have put themselves in and the oppressions that they have caused to others. But they are getting their final warning, I believe, and maybe it is time for this world to see a better light and remind each other about God. And this is where the Quran has its amazing spot in this world for us to truly remember and recognize what God has told us so that we are on the right side of history. With that said, I pray that you guys are enjoying these. All praise to our God, the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of the whole nations. Peace be upon you.